Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Wandering Podcast, where we take advisement from outside the box. I'm Rihanna Ritter, your host. I'm an intuitive, sexuality, and authentic expression coach. Are you an accomplished professional who plays the part of having it all figured out? Who's strong for everyone else but feels lonely, misunderstood, like you can't tell anybody the truth about how stressed you are, how not passionate you are about your life and all that you've created? I guide my clients to deep, lasting fulfillment. I re-engage them with their bodies, their pleasure, their desire. I help them align to enjoy fulfillment and prosperity in all areas of their lives.
Today, my guest is Judith Belmont, Master of Science. She's a retired psychotherapist and mental health and self-help author of 11 books. She holds a Master of Science in Clinical Psychology from Hahnemann Medical College in Philadelphia, and a Bachelor of Science in Psychology from the University of Pennsylvania. She retired from a private therapy practice after 40 years and now offers mental health coaching online, as well as monthly webinars on workplace communication. Welcome, Judith. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to see you. So is your latest book the 110 CBT Tips and Tools?
Yep, I actually have it right here. 110 CBT Tips and Tools. As you can see, it's a pretty thick book, and basically it's a workbook. It's a self-help workbook using cognitive behavioral therapy tips to change the way that you're thinking in order to change the quality of your life.
Oh, wow. Amazing. So I don't think I've seen a workbook before, which is really cool. And some of the things that you point out is dial down anxiety, make stress your friend, express anger in a healthy way. I think so many of us do not know how to make stress our friend or express anger in a healthy way.
Right. So what this book does is, and what CBT does, cognitive behavioral therapy, is it gives hands-on tools and practices that you can use in order to improve the quality of your life. You don't have to have depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, communication issues, anger issues in order to benefit from CBT. You could just use it to enhance your life, because we all get curveballs thrown at us in life, and we all could use a little emotional tune-up sometime. So this book has mini lessons. It has little self-help quizzes, handouts, worksheets, visualizations, a lot of different things so that you can learn life skills. And I can give you an example if you want.
Yeah.
So one of the hallmarks of cognitive behavioral therapy is identifying cognitive distortions. Cognitive distortions are extreme irrational ways of thinking. And when we think irrationally, we're going to feel bad. So a lot of depression is caused by irrational ways that we think. Not 100%. There's some biochemical, there's some genetic, but a lot of it we have control over by focusing on the quality of our thoughts and eliminating cognitive distortions. So as an example, if you think, I really messed up, I shouldn't have said that, I'll never get it together, I'm such an idiot. So let's say we have that kind of self-talk. You could be talking about it to yourself or to someone else. They're full with cognitive distortions. So identifying the distortions, such as, I'll never get it together. That's all or nothing thinking and fortune telling. I'm such an idiot. That's an example of labeling. I'll never get it together. It's generalization and catastrophizing. So these are all types of cognitive distortions. And if we, number one, recognize them, then we can do what's called cognitive restructuring. Then you actually change your thoughts. You write it down. I'll never get it together. And then you'll say, well, that's fortune telling, that's over catastrophizing. And then on the other side of the paper, you rewrite it in a healthier way with restructuring that thought. I'm afraid that I'm going to continue this pattern. One is fiction and one is fact. I'm such an idiot. Another way of looking at it, restructuring that thought, is I don't feel good about myself right now. So one way is factual thinking, and the other way is very dramatic, out of control thinking. That would be an example of cognitive behavior therapy and the techniques to use to change your thoughts to improve your life.
Amazing. And so like a lot of these distortions come from early childhood where we're not really, our prefrontal cortex isn't developed, and so we make very interesting associations that aren't usually rational, and they do tend to be very dramatic and catastrophic, and we're in such a survival state as children. Our brain just isn't functioning the way that it's ready. It's not time to be processing that kind of information, right?
I think even in society, we're kind of trained to think that people have control over us. We're not talking about abuse here or criminal behavior, but we give people more power. So like, for instance, if someone says, boy, he really stresses me out. That's actually not true. That's really fiction. I'm stressed when I'm with him, or I am stressed when he says these things to me. So one is factual, then you're in control. So it's not just, necessarily any unusual socialization that we have. Certainly when people have trauma when they're younger, of course, there's going to be a lot more cognitive distortions because there's a lot more shaming that we have received and a lot more unhealthy messages. But in society in general, people often think that they're not in control of their thoughts or their feelings. And a lot of people don't even know what thoughts and feelings are because they confuse them. And what cognitive behavior therapy does, it helps you learn what is a thought and what's a feeling. So if you say to someone, for instance, I feel like you're criticizing me, that's actually irrational. Why? Because that's not a feeling. I feel bad because I think you're criticizing me. So you can't change your feeling. You can change the thought that caused that feeling. But you have to first know what's a thought and what's a feeling. So just think of like I'm thinking when I grew up, there was popular songs such as You Make Me So Very Happy by Blood, Sweat, and Tears. And I used to think that was a happy song until I learned about cognitive behavior therapy and I realized that's kind of a scary song. Because if you can make me very happy, you can make me very unhappy. You can make me suicidal. You can make me angry. You can make me anything.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of songs that were in our common culture that doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And we can be so attracted to the drama of it because our bodies kind of get addicted to these hormonal fluctuations, right? And so when we have these thoughts that we then associate with a feeling and then our body responds. So I see that a lot, right?
It's called the triangle. There's thoughts, there's feelings, and there's behaviors. They keep on running into each other in CBT, cognitive behavior therapy. It focuses on your thoughts, create your feelings, which end up creating your choices in life and your behaviors.
Yeah. And so if we're listening to music, like, for example, that's constantly giving our power away or saying, because, and we like the feeling, the rush of emotion, we can really enjoy that. It's a sensation, right? It's part of what we're in a body
Absolutely.
for.
I'm thinking I used to love when I was a kid. That dates me a little bit because most people of your listeners probably won't even know this song, but I Can't Stop Loving You by Ray Charles. That was a popular song back in the 60s. And I Can't Stop Loving You. I thought that was a romantic song until I realized that is a really codependent, dysfunctional song. I can't stop loving you. Can't. It's hard to stop loving you. Yeah, that's a rational way. I'm having difficulty to stop loving you, but I can't. But it's interesting. The next line is I can't stop loving you. I made up my mind. So that's already irrational right there.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
the one that I thought was real romantic until I realized it was like really sick song is Engelbert Humperdinck in the 60s and 70s was a famous singer. And his very popular hit was There Goes My Reason for Living, There Goes My Everything. I mean, that's really scary. But I used to
Yeah.
think it was a romantic song when I was a teenager. Little did I realize, or young, maybe even before teenager, when he was so popular. And then I'm thinking, wow, that is really a very sad song that you are not responsible for your happiness.
Yeah.
Happiness is really between your ears. It's not really out there. A lot of people think I'm going to feel good about myself if I do this, or if I buy this car, or I wear these clothes, or I get my, hair done or whatever. And they think that that kind of thing will make them happy, but it doesn't work that way. It's your
Yeah.
attitude towards things.
Yeah. It's a choice. And sometimes, I'll be talking with people who aren't really interested in the mental health field, and they'll be singing this song, and then I'll point out, well, that's quite something that's saying. And they're like, oh, it's not a big deal. It doesn't matter. And then, a few minutes later, complaining about how their life circumstances playing out in the exact way that this song is talking about. It's like,
Yeah.
what you're feeding yourself.
Well, I don't think people often realize it because we're not necessarily socialized to think that way. We're socialized to think that other people are responsible for our feelings. Oh, she makes me so mad. Nobody can do it. Now, we're not talking about abuse. I mean, there are areas where someone can really do a lot of damage with a very young child and a very, abuse or whatever. But, we're talking about within normal communication.
Yeah. Yeah. And, children who get abused tend to end up in abusive relationships afterward because
And they end up often having very low self-esteem and having effects of that abuse.
yeah. And
But even then you can relearn in a safe place. Now that after when you're in a safe place, you can relearn things. And what CBT does is it gives you the tools to relearn. It's not like, oh, think more positively. It actually shows you how to think more positively.
yeah.
With restructuring, with separating fact from fiction, with separating thoughts from feelings. There's specific skills, and that's why I break these down into tips, because each tip is standalone and it teaches you what you need at the time.
Yeah. And so you have 11 other books as well.
Yeah.
Are they similar workbooks, or what's the
I
range?
do have some other workbooks because I find it very helpful that people can fill in things and they can do the activities, having a lot of hands-on examples. But I have a lot of smaller books from other publishers. I've published with, I guess, 4 or 5 publishers in all. And I have a self-care book, self-esteem book that's a lot smaller, like 365 days of self-esteem. So they're not as meaty. They're more like a thought a day or a mini workbook, maybe, not quite as dense as that.
Yeah. And so anybody who has tried, affirmations, and I don't know, we have a very interesting idea of self-care in our society. It usually has to do with a lot of spending of money and going to a spa or something like that.
Going to a spa or something like that. Yeah, okay too.
Yeah, yeah. So
Real self-care. I like that you use that term affirmations. That's actually one of the tips in the book. Affirmations are one of the ways that can help you stay positive and grounded throughout the day. And so I explain how to make affirmations, and maybe you'll have an affirmation that you write out or you print out, and then you cut into strips, you put it, and you have an affirmation jar. And then every day you pick out an affirmation. So you can kind of have fun. And, with some of these activities, it doesn't have to be all you read about it and you write. You actually can do things. I have a stress management jar or a box where you have symbols of different areas of stress management to remind you to stay grounded. And you keep it in your kitchen, and maybe your kids help you with it. How can that help you? Like maybe a little ball that's spongy, and it reminds you that balls kind of roll with it and they can keep their shape even if they're crushed. And maybe you have a penny in there, and that will talk to you about the importance of embracing change. That change can be good. Change is part of life. Examples.
Yeah, that's cool. So a lot of people have a challenge with an affirmation that they don't believe. So how do you help people, get through that?
Well, the affirmations that I would use are ones that you have to believe, otherwise it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So let's say an affirmation is, I'm a good person. I'm going to remind myself I'm a good person. But there's that self-critical part in there that says, no, you're not good enough. So you use some CBT skills and activities and work it through that I'm having the feeling that I am not worthy, although I know objectively I am. So I am going to remind myself, because even if I'm not feeling it, I am going to stick to my facts and not other people's narrative that maybe I've learned that I'm not quite okay, and work through that. Sometimes it does take, an affirmation. You don't want to have an affirmation you don't believe in, but sometimes you need to be reminded of that. Another CBT activity that I have is coping cards. You have like old-fashioned note cards. You don't see them around that much anymore, because so many things are computerized. But have a note card and an affirmation and just bring it around in your pocket or your purse, and maybe a new one every day. One that you do believe, but one that you have a hard time accepting and adopting.
Yeah, that's really cool.
But
Do you find that it's helpful for people to handwrite things over rather than typing them? Or
I don't know. I have such bad handwriting, it causes stress in me. So I like to go on the computer. Because I write it and I'm thinking, what did I say? I can't even can't even read it. So whatever works for you. There's no one size fits all. But I think writing things down is good, and then telling someone about it. Because when you tell someone about it, it makes it more real. You actually express it, and it makes it more important to you to actually actualize it.
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah,
So sharing with
accountability.
someone, the best way to grow individually is through relationships. And so as you grow, it's not like, okay, I gotta like hunker down and figure out my life here and figure out whatever. Enlist people for support. Having support is super, super important.
Yeah, absolutely. I found that after my divorce, I chose to be celibate for a year so that I could be with myself and get to know what kind of patterns were happening within me that were attracting these types of relationships, right? And then I found myself not wanting to get back into a relationship because I was like, I don't want to get triggered. And I had a friend that was like, yeah, but you're not growing because you're just staying so safe. You're not relating with anybody.
Good point.
Yeah. So
Getting out of your comfort zone can be challenging, but it's also very growth producing. And what you just said reminds me of something that I live by. is it's really important to have a growth mindset instead of a fixed mindset. A growth mindset is, even if I'm triggered, I'm going to grow from it, I'm going to heal from it, and I will learn from it. A fixed mindset is, I'm not going there.
Yeah.
And it might seem like it's safe, but it's actually not, because you end up being in your own mental prison. And you then end up having self-limiting beliefs that this isn't going to be safe for me, so I'm not going to do it. I'm not even going there, but it's going to prevent you from a lot of joy. It's just like stress. A lot of people think that stress is bad, but stress just is. Stress is really the spice of life. We need stress to grow. We need stress to evolve. When I would do live seminars and I would say, fill in this blank, stress is blank. And I would write it on a chart, a flip chart or something. People said exhausting, terrible, whatever, a lot of bad stuff. Very, very few times do people say energizing, invigorating, good stuff. And really, change is, and stress is inevitable in our lives. How about going on vacation? That's stressful, but people certainly spend a lot of money and they go out of their way to do it. How about getting married? How about having a child? How about having a grandchild? That's all stressful, but it's stress that gives meaning to our lives. If we escape stress, we escape meaning from our lives.
Mhm.
You don't want to do that. You want to embrace it, but manage it instead of carrying it. You want to feel like I'm in balance, like a rubber band. You stretch it too much, it's going to snap. But if it's too limp, it's not going to have any form or function. You need to have enough stress that you have meaning and challenge, but not too much that you're going to have a nervous breakdown, and not too little that you're going to be alienated, bored, and depressed.
Yeah. Yeah. Something you talked about, like when you're alone all the time, then you create your own mental limitations and your own, you get stuck in your own thought loops, and you use the term fixed mindset. And, I immediately went to, when you said fix, like fix myself, which I did get totally addicted to at some point, and then had to learn that, and then this feeling of, oh, I need to protect my energy. I need to learn how to close down my field and protect my energy. And then, over time, learning that I need to be affected by things. Like, that's kind of the point.
Absolutely. It's, we're all works in progress, and we're all on a path of discovery.
Yeah. And then something you said,
flexible.
yes. And flexibility does come from being stretched, right? Like, that's the body and mentally and emotionally and every way.
And for some people, it's harder than others, certain concepts, because maybe we're not wired that way, or our background has kind of jaded us in certain ways, or our life circumstances make it difficult. But I think of this simple exercise where you clasp the fingers like this. You want to try it? Clasp your fingers. And is your right or left thumb on top?
Left.
Okay, same thing with mine. But in a live group, it's usually about half and half. Now try it the other way, that you release the fingers and you put the right thumb on top. How does it feel?
Uncomfortable.
Strange. But for half of the population, it's perfectly normal.
Mm.
But so many times we're so used to seeing things in our way, to stretch it a little bit is a no-brainer for some people. Some people naturally feel comfortable, but other people, it's out of their comfort zone. Doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just out of their comfort zone. We need to be able to be flexible. When people have a fixed mindset, they see things in that way and they can't look at things in another way. And those are generally not very happy people.
Yeah, definitely.
And they're not so much fun to be around either.
No.
Their
Yeah.
way the best way.
Try traveling with someone like that.
Wouldn't want to. Wouldn't be fun. That would be stressful.
Very stressful. Unnecessarily stressful. One of your blogs, there's an excerpt from Embrace Your Greatness, and you say that too often people lug their past around and reread the headlines that are months, years, even decades old. Would you keep rereading front page headlines from 1980, 1990? And I think a lot of people resist therapy and coaching because they like to say that they've left their past behind, or they've gotten over it, they've forgotten it, although they've never actually done basically what cognitive behavioral therapy is, reframing of it, right? They're saying that they've moved on, but they are carrying it around, and it is showing up in their life over and over.
I think you're absolutely right. I see it like let's say someone moved to this country at 6 or 7 or 8 years old, and even when they're 50, 60, 70, they have an accent. You can't erase your past. That's part of your fabric. You learn a certain language, you learn a certain emotional language, and that stays with you. It doesn't mean you can't get better. Let's say this person moved to the United States. Doesn't mean you can't get better with learning more English. You could perfect your English, but you still have that accent. And I don't think people ever get over anything completely 100%. It's woven into our lives and into our personalities. And if we can make us use these experiences as making us deeper instead of weaker, that's good. Because the deeper you are, the more empathetic you're going to be, the more of a person of character you're going to be, rather than someone who's a mess.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's always interesting to watch someone. I think we all have a person in our lives that keeps telling the same story over and over and over, and it's like, I'm talking like a negative one, something that happened in their life that they're just so angry about, right? And then, but they don't ever actually process the anger. They keep lashing out at other people. They take their anger out on people, but they don't actually reframe what happened and process the anger and allow themselves to fully feel it so that they can move on from it.
Well, these are people who count their disappointments a lot more than their blessings. And they end up being bitter because life didn't give them what they deserved or what they wanted. But people who are stress resilient are happier people because they move on and don't get stuck in the past, because you don't want to move that way. You want to move forward, not backward. But a lot of people have regrets. A lot of people have trauma that makes them so anchored in the past. And one of the things that I talk about in my book and have some of my tips on, I have a chapter on it actually, is mindfulness. Mindfulness is focusing on the present so you can create a better future. It's not ruminating and regurgitating what happened, what should have happened, what shouldn't have happened, why it couldn't have happened, because we don't have control over that. We only have control of being a victor instead of a victim. We're either a survivor or we're a victim. And like even with post-traumatic stress, you could have post-traumatic stress, but you could also have post-traumatic growth. And some people focus on their stress and what happened, and other people focus on how they can incorporate that stress to actually grow and to heal.
Mm.
It takes flexibility to do that. A different way of mindset, different way of thinking. Some people are wired to be happier. I do believe that, and research has shown that. So what CBT does is for people who need more help with skills to learn happiness habits, that is very helpful.
Yeah. And something that we talk about a lot on this podcast is manifestation. And so an example, like this morning, to manifest, you need to be focused on the thing that you want to happen, right? That it's just like diverting your focus to the thing that you want rather than the thing that you don't want. And this morning I woke up and finally had the thought, actually, I've been living the life that I want every single day for the past 2 years. And yet I've been measuring it against some old set of standards that I was always measuring my life on before. So I'm not even appreciating and enjoying all of the wonderful things that are happening right now because I'm so busy judging myself for not having it show up the way that it used to. Right?
Well, you used an interesting word, judging. And that's another cognitive distortion, is judging and shoulding on yourself. Because when you should on yourself and others, you end up getting stuck, and the expectations are extremely unfair. But we often do it to ourselves and we do it to others.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you're talking about this, I'm thinking of one of the tips in the book is stop looking at, I don't know exactly the words of the tip, but basically to stop looking at some of your old stuff, old issues as front page news anymore. Because just think of what's on your front page news. Or most of it have to do with things you can't control or you can't change. And how can you get them back to section D20? How can you get that back? What do you want to have? And I actually have a front page of what actually you're thinking about. And if you find there's too many things that you have no control over and you're treating things from a long time ago, whether you screwed up or someone else screwed up, as front page news. What needs to be further in the back? And what do you want your front page news to be today? And if the news keeps on being the same every day, you know that you're stuck too much in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. And even that can apply to positive things, because what I was doing was I was measuring, like I was looking at certain successes, certain measures of success from the past and being like, well, I don't have that one. I'm not checking that box. Therefore, everything else that I'm doing right now is irrelevant. Which is
Interesting you said that. So that's a cognitive distortion of all or nothing thinking. That because this didn't work, everything's not good. You know, it's like, you know, if I'm on a diet and I have the piece of pie, I blew it. I might as well just have 3 pieces. Well, what's the difference? Maybe about 1,000 calories. So there is a big difference. But a lot of times when we think in this all or nothing ways, we end up undermining our growth and our happiness. And also it affects others. If we think that way, we're going to have those kooky thoughts on other people too.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
when you're raising children or you're working with coworkers or you're dealing in relationships, you want to have the healthiest mind so you can be the healthiest communicator. And in the book, I talk about I statements versus you statements. Like, for example, if you say, how could you say that? That's actually very rude, because what are you actually saying? It's really a put down. What you're saying is stupid. How can you say that? You're not really asking a question. That's called a rhetorical question. What's wrong with you? Didn't I already tell you that? Rhetorical questions aren't questions, they're put downs. So that would be aggressive. So it's important to look at the way you communicate and learn to replace you statements with I statements. It's none of your business, a you statement. I don't feel comfortable sharing something so personal as an I statement. One is rude, one is growth producing and self-respecting, but also respecting the other person.
Yeah, we have a lot of difficulty with the way that we communicate. Well, certainly, I think, when you grow up in a family that doesn't practice nonviolent communication, you probably think that the whole world struggles with it because your little world did.
And you might expect it and be surprised when it doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
When you drive in a car and if your friend's there and you take a wrong turn and they don't yell at you, it's like, huh, this is something. Because
Right.
you still have that old visceral reaction that, if I make a mistake, I'd hear about it.
Yeah. And so it's really cool to get in the study of, nonviolent communication, cognitive behavioral therapy. Did you read the book, The Drama of the Gifted Child by Alice Miller?
Mm.
Oh, it's just fascinating because I think she was a therapist for therapists. And so she talked about how a lot of therapists are wounded healers, right? They've had challenges in their own life and it led them to want to fix it. They learn how to fix it and then they learn how to teach other people how to. So she just pointed out how often a therapist with their patient can get into this dynamic that we all get into all the time with all of our relationships, where we're trying to fix the relationship with our parent. So we're projecting whatever dysfunction happened with our parent onto the person that's in front of us. And so she mentioned how, like, for example, a therapist will attract a lot of clients that will be, and I did this when I was in therapy with my therapist. I wanted to be the good student and I didn't want to take any more accountability for what was happening. I didn't want to change anymore than wherever I had gotten to that was comfortable. So I just started performing well and doing everything she told me to do. And then she kept, it kept becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy where she'd be like, well, you're just so quick. Like you just picked this up so well. And I was like, yeah, I do. And then I started, I took it even further to the point that I was lying and saying that I was doing what she was wanting me to do. And I just finally was just like, I've had enough of this. So like you can get into a situation with your therapist where you're manipulating your therapist is manipulating. It's so
Totally. Interesting example. Not that uncommon either.
yeah, it's really
Yes,
awesome.
with your therapist, you enact your relationships of significant people in your life. It's called transference. That's the word for transference, is you transfer some of those issues or feelings. So if, for instance, someone like who, parents maybe were very judgmental or disapproving, and the therapist seems to disapprove, you might not want to see that therapist anymore.
Yeah.
It's like, no, that's too much of a trigger for me.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right, it's very important to try to be, as much as you can, non-judgmental and kind. But, therapists also could be triggered too.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're all humans and that's not a reason to give up on therapy altogether. It's just a reason to explore another therapy relationship. Right.
Right? Or talk about it. Express, what's going on. Why you felt, uncomfortable with something. That's, if you generally like a therapist, I mean, you don't want to have a therapist have a higher standard than just an ordinary human being. Therapists make mistakes too. When I look back, yeah, there's some things that I remember handling things not as well as I would now with my extra years and extra understanding of things. I was certainly never abusive with anybody, but, there's things I realized, when I have flashbacks to certain situations, like, yeah, I probably would have handled that differently now. We're all works in progress, even the therapist.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I always appreciated when clients would tell me if they were uncomfortable with something. Like there was one time, many, many, many years ago, and I actually saw that person for a long time, but from many years ago, I had worksheets and handouts from my books, and I would give the handout to this client, and he, was good, was on communication, using I statements, whatever. And then a couple months later, I took out the same sheet. Oh boy, he didn't like that because he felt like I was insulting him because he should have already learned that already. But that wasn't my intention. You have to keep on looking at these sheets over and over and over and again in order to learn it. So it wasn't my intention, but I'm glad he said it. He got really, upset. And he says, you must think I'm really stupid or something. You already gave me that. I said, no, when you have a worksheet, you often need to use it at different times, depending on if you need that structure.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
It
an
is.
example.
Yeah. And that could have gone totally sideways where he went and saw a different therapist because he was so
Right.
insulted and wouldn't say anything.
Exactly, right. But I'm glad he did. And
Yeah.
that was good. It was like, okay. And then I realized, okay, I need to be more sensitive to that.
Yeah. And but these things take repetition, right? You don't go to one therapy session and then, oh, I learned to.
And the same thing with these workbooks, these pages in here. This is, let's say, a stress diary template I have over here, stress diary. You don't do it once and done and then you learn the lesson. I encourage people to photocopy it so that they keep on doing it, or on another piece of paper, draw these lines and do the same thing, because it's just a tool to keep on trying. I have a huge amount of different logs that you can do, things that, that you need to do it more than once in order to relearn a different language.
Yeah, and sometimes we forget the tools or don't know how to apply them to a new situation or a slightly different one, right?
Right. Or you just need the support. If anything, the first time doesn't do that much because you're not developing any habits from it. You're just learning it. You want to keep on repeating it. So, but, I didn't realize to him, it was like, yeah, you must think I'm stupid because I have that old standard sheet you gave me the first session. But actually,
Yeah.
I assume that everybody knows that, yeah, these worksheets are you constantly fine tune. But, some people aren't, I never really thought of explaining that. So subsequently with clients, I would say, these sheets are meant to be used often. And we're going to be using them often. So I learned from that,
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. That makes me think about like often when I'm going to use romantic relationship as example, where we feel that we are either supposed to read our partner's mind or they are supposed to read ours. And if we don't know, that we are stupid ourselves. Like I'm supposed to assume. So it leads to all these assumptions that we make, and so many fights come
those
out
are
of
very
it.
dangerous in relationships because there's a lot of expectations that someone's going to be very disappointed. And the best thing is to be assertive and say, I'm not sure what you need from me, or I'm not sure what you're trying to tell me. And I can't read your mind. Actually, mind reading is a cognitive distortion. That's an example of a cognitive distortion. He didn't say anything when he walked by. He must be mad at me. Jumping to conclusions. These are all cognitive distortions. These are things, that's a hallmark of CBT. That's why it's so powerful and so popular, is that it can help us in everyday life kind of sort out all these emotions and make it more attainable to take control of your life and your feelings and your thoughts.
Yeah, communication with ourselves and with other people is just
Self-talk. Have a sort of self-talk. If you know, we often say things to ourselves that we would never say to anybody else.
Yeah.
And that is not healthy.
No.
Having more positive self-talk. It's interesting when I would ask people, you know, what do you think of the key to happiness? People would say, yeah, when, you know, I have someone to love, or nothing wrong with that. That's real good. You know, I want to have, like, you know, really nice home and whatever. You know, all those things are good, but really the real ingredient to a happy life and to self-esteem and feeling good about yourself is self-compassion. People who are self-compassionate are much happier than people who aren't, because people who are self-compassionate don't beat themselves up so much. They don't have all these expectations and shoulds on themselves.
And I would say that they tend to be more flexible and their life outcomes tend to be more positive.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's important also to have compassion and empathy for others.
Yeah.
But it's hard. It's just like the flight attendant with the mask. You have to put the mask on if you're with young children. You put the mask on yourself before you help anybody else. A lot of times people want to be selfless. I've had many clients say, that's my goal. I want to be selfless. They think that's great. The problem is they get in these messed up relationships. They feel angry. They feel taken advantage of because they want to be so selfless. They end up being very self-denying and end up getting stepped on.
Yeah. Yeah. And I definitely was in that pattern for a good amount of my life. Just that so common among women to
Absolutely.
try to pour from an empty cup. You know,
Yeah.
there's
Good
nothing in
analogy.
it, so nothing's coming out.
Good analogy. Because people can't give you what they don't have to give. And pouring from an empty cup is like that. You can't give if you don't even have it. And if you're not compassionate, you're not going to be as compassionate to other people. You're not going to have that level of empathy. It's
Yeah.
going to be.
So what do you like about coaching versus therapy?
Well, you know, I retired from Pennsylvania. I live in Florida. And so I don't have a license here. And I find it very convenient because I coach online. And some people I see from Pennsylvania still, but it doesn't go through insurance. And basically, my orientation has always been life skills CBT. So it's not that different than how I did as a therapist, but it is something I can legally do without a therapeutic license, because as I retired and moved to Florida, you know, didn't want to start a whole new practice.
Yeah. Yeah. Quite a lot. So where can people find you and how do they work with you?
Great. Go on Belmont Wellness. My last name is Belmont Wellness. And there's a lot of free handouts, worksheets, and things like in the workbook, in this workbook and in my other ones. And so there are free resources, but there's also my books there. And there's some videos and things, and you can contact me through that. So Belmont Wellness would be a good way to do that. And also, if you want to look and to check out 110 CBT tips and tools or any of my other books, you can even go on my Amazon page. I have Judith Belmont on Amazon, and you can check out what I have there.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for creating these workbooks. It seems like such a wonderful tool, and there are a lot of people that may not have access to therapy or health insurance or whatever. So it's wonderful to have this tool available to them, and it really makes the world a better place.
I'm all for self-help. Yep. Thank you very
Awesome.
much for interviewing me. It's really been a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you for being here. Have a great afternoon.
You too. Thank you.